right, well, welcome back to our story time together. We were reading the 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins by Dr. Seuss, about a young boy who, every time he takes his hat off, there's another one there. And the king is not very happy with him. And so he keeps trying to do more and more things to get him to take off his hat. Let's see what shakes up for our poor hero today. For a moment, Bartholomew was terribly frightened. Still, he thought to himself, the king can do nothing dreadful to punish me, because I really haven't done anything wrong. It would be cowardly to feel afraid. Bartholomew threw back his shoulders and marched straight ahead into the palace. "Follow the black carpet," said the guard at the door. All through the long hallway, Bartholomew could hear the mutterings of voices behind heavy doors. "He won't take off his hat. No, he won't take off his hat." Bartholomew walked on till he stood in the very middle of the throne room. The king, in a long scarlet robe, was sitting on his throne. Beside him stood Sir Alaric, keeper of the king's records. He wore in his belt, instead of a sword, a long silver ruler. Lords and noblemen of the court stood solemn and silent. The king looked down at Bartholomew severely. "Young man, I'll give you one more chance. Will you take off your hat for your king?" "Your Majesty," said Bartholomew as politely as he possibly could, "I will, but I'm afraid it won't do any good." And he took off his hat, and it didn't do any good. Another hat sat on Bartholomew's head. He took off hat after hat after hat after hat until he was standing in the middle of a great pile of hats. The lords and noblemen were so astonished they couldn't even speak. Such a thing had never happened in the throne room before. "Cubbins," said Sir Alaric, keeper of the records, blinking behind his triangular spectacles. "He has taken off 45. "And there were 3 more down in the town," said the king. "And you must add the 87 more that blew off my head as we galloped up the hill," said Bartholomew, trying to be helpful. 135 hats. Most unusual," said Sir Alaric, writing it down on a long scroll. "Come, said the king impatiently. "Sir Alaric, what do you make of all this nonsense?" "Very serious nonsense, your Majesty," answered Sir Alaric. "I advise you to call in an expert on hats." "Excellent," agreed the king. "Oh, guard! Fetch in Sir Snips, maker of hats for all the fine lords." Into the throne room marched the smallest man, wearing the tallest hat that Bartholomew had ever seen. It was Sir Snips. Instead of a sword, he wore at his side a large pair of scissors. "Look at this boy's hat," commanded the king. Sir Snips looked at Bartholomew Cubbins' hat and sniffed in disgust. Then he turned to the king and bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, I, Sir Snips, am the maker of hats for all the fine lords. I make hats of cloth of gold, fine silks, and gems and ostrich plumes. You ask me what I think of this hat? Pooh! It is the most ordinary hat I have ever set eyes on." "In that case," said the king, "it should be very simple for you to take it off." "Simple indeed," mumbled Sir Snips haughtily, and standing on his tiptoes, he pushed his pudgy thumb at Bartholomew's hat and knocked it to the floor. Immediately, another appeared on Bartholomew's head. "Dreamies!" screamed Sir Snips, leaping into the air higher than he was tall. Then he turned and ran shrieking out of the throne room. "Dear me," said the king, looking very puzzled. "If Sir Snips can't do it, this must be more than an ordinary hat." 136, wrote Sir Alaric, wrinkling his brow. Your Majesty, I advise that you call in your wise men. A fine idea, said the king. Oh, God! Bring me Nad. Nad knows about everything in all my kingdom. In came an old man. He looked at the hat on Bartholomew's head, and he looked at the pile of hats on the floor. Nad, my wise man, can you take off his hat? Asked the king. Nad shook his head solemnly. Solemnly, no. Then fetch me the father of Nad, commanded the king. He knows all about everything in all my kingdom and in all the world beyond. In came an even older man. But when he looked at Bartholomew's hats, the father of Nad merely locked his fingers across his beard and said nothing. Then bring me the father of Nad, ordered the king. He knows about everything in all my kingdom, in all the world beyond, and in all other worlds that may happen to be. In came the oldest man of them all. But he just looked at Bartholomew and nibbled nervously at the end of his beard. Does this mean there is no one in my whole kingdom who can take off this boy's hat? Bellowed the king in a terrifying voice. A small voice came up through the balcony window. What's the matter, Uncle Derwin? To Bartholomew, it sounded like the voice of a boy. The king stepped out of the balcony and leaned over the marble railing. There's a boy in here, just about your age, the king said. He won't take off his hat. Bartholomew tiptoed up behind the king and looked down. There stood a boy with a big lace collar, a very proud little boy with his nose in the air. It was the Grand Duke Wilfrid, nephew of the king. You sent him down here, said the Grand Duke Wilfrid. I'll fix him. The king thought for a moment. He pushed back his crown and scratched his head. Well, maybe you can. There's no harm trying. Take him to the Grand Duke Wilfrid, commanded the king, and two of the king's own guards led Bartholomew out of the throne room. Phew, said the Grand Duke Wilfrid, looking at Bartholomew's hat and laughing meanly. That hat won't come off. You stand over there. He pointed to the corner where the wall curved out. I need a little target practice with my bow and arrow. When Bartholomew saw that the Grand Duke Wilfrid had only a child's bow, he didn't feel frightened. He spoke up proudly. I can shoot with my father's big bow. My bow's plenty big enough for shooting hats, especially hats like yours, answered Wilfrid. And he let fly an arrow. Zip! It grazed Bartholomew's forehead and nipped off his hat. Away it blew and over the parapet. But another hat appeared on his head. Zoom! 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 The arrows flew. Till the Grand Duke's whole bag full of arrows was gone. And still a hat sat upon Bartholomew's head. It's not fair, cried the Grand Duke. It's not fair. He threw down his bow and stamped on it. 154 hats, gulped Sir Alaric. These hats are driving me mad, the king's voice rang out through all the palace. Why waste time with a child's bow and arrow? Fetch me the mightiest bow and arrow in all my realm. Fetch the yeoman of the Bowman. Yeoman of the Bowman, echoed all the lords and noblemen of the court. A gigantic man strode across the terrace. His bow was as big as the branch of a tree. The arrow was twice as long as Bartholomew and thicker than his wrist. Yeoman of the Bowman, said the king, shoot off this boy's hat and make it stay off. Bartholomew was trembling so hard that he could scarcely stand straight. The yeoman bent back his mighty bow. Zip! Like a mad giant hornet, the arrow tore through the air toward Bartholomew Cubbins. Zap! The sharp arrowhead bit through his hat and carried it off. On and on for a full half-mile. Zap! It plunked to a stop in the heart of an oak tree. Yet there on Bartholomew's head sat another hat. The face of the yeoman of the Bowman went white as the palace walls. "It's black magic!" he shrieked. "Black magic! That's just what it is," sighed the king with relief. I should have thought of that before. That makes things simple. Back to the throne room. Call my magicians. In the whole throne room there wasn't a sound as loud as a breath. But from the spiral stairs that led down from the southwest tower came the shuffling of slow, padded feet. The magicians were coming. Low and slow they were chanting words that were strange. Dig a hole 5 furlongs deep, down to where the night snakes creep. Mix and mold the mystic mud, Malber, Balber, Titter, Tud. Ooh, and I'm afraid that we are out of time again. So, Bartholomew Cubbins has got himself in quite a mess, hasn't he? How do you think he's going to get out of this one? Well, we're going to have to come back on next Friday and find out how. So, that's something for you to look forward to for next week. In the meantime, just drop me a note and let me know. Are you having fun with these story times? I wanted to do something a little different to end the week on. So I've been doing this. But if you don't like this, just let me know. We'll figure something else out to do. And if you do like it, please let me know. I have fun making these, but if it's not fun for you, let me know. And if it is fun for you, please tell me. I would love to know. Well, that's it for us today. So goodbye, and I will see you on Monday. Ta-ta.